Okay, good day, people. So I thought I would try to see if I can't today give a thumbnail sketch of what I'm taking to be the central or the key issues in the origin and development of religiosity. And I guess in some way I will see if I can't try to make this claim that this is this is the core issue. This is the core issue. When we go back and look at earliest peoples around the globe, the dawn of religiosity, where and when it occurs, it emerges as a context for registering the kind of self-awareness that was setting in. Now, I think one thing to mention here is that this was the process by which self-governance and self-consciousness, and today what we would call conscience, the process by which that was setting in was taking thousands of years, arguably tens of thousands of years, and it was drifting in and out. And I want to stress, at the earliest times, I think it was wholly collectivist. There's lots of evidence on this from different people's one great source would be just Nietzsche. Nietzsche would say that, in the earliest peoples, whatever brought harm to the collective, that's what brought the sting of conscience. That is, the individual felt conscience and felt the wrongdoing when harm occurred from the result of actions. Now, I'm going to see if I can't get at that more. So I think part of the problem is what that means to say that nature slowly and I guess imperceptibly until it set in, but nature slowly allowed for, or it enabled the evolution of self-governance, of choice, of deliberation, of thought about options and then selecting from one of those options. Now, at first it wasn't individual. It wasn't the individual experience that I think we all have today of conscience, of all kinds of choosing. I mean, today it's been sort of dwindled down, but you can imagine, in the earliest time period, people collectively, they projected images of the gods and had some notion of the gods in order to register themselves. That is, the gods were the distance and the other through which they could be an other for the other. That is, they could come to themselves through the distance that the gods provided. And the gods were some kind of overseers with this question of how their actions and their chosen actions related to, I guess, events in the larger environment. So part of the problem is that agency, as it's developing in humanity, as the notion of self-chosen purpose and of teleology, of conscious directedness toward a future, even if that was a recollection and a carrying over of traditions and a need to, again, to continue to perpetuate the past, this still is caught within those conscious senses of decision making, with dealing with oneself and one's own action in less than an instinctive or in less than a mindless way. Now, I think we still have this today. I mean, I think we all know the degree to which sometimes we feel very explicitly self-conscious of ourselves and we're very aware of making decisions. Other times we're like an ongoing flow of habits and practices and cultural traditions where we hardly even realize ourselves as agents, or our sense of agency is dimmed down. It's that problem, that emergence. I mean, not only do you have everything in Christianity and in the West with this notion of free will and the actions that are aligned with free will, but I mean, even in the East, when you go to notions of karma, when you go to notions of one's doing, I think these religious traditions were registering the dawn of deliberation, of conscious choice, of agency, and how conscience emerged in nature as a result of this. Now, see, part of the problem, I think, is that people are superstitious. I mean, we're organisms who look for relations where relations aren't obvious, and that creates a kind of superstitiousness. And the problem is that people engaged in various kinds of action that then got associated with or aligned with various kinds of consequences in the natural environment. So there could be scarcity or abundance, or there could be a successful hunt or an unsuccessful hunt, or there could be a hardship that suddenly, is inflicted upon the collective, or suddenly out of nowhere a windfall could happen. And those outward sort of environmental consequences, when those got aligned or I guess misaligned with conscious actions and conscious intended deeds, those became the grounding for the belief that the gods were somehow overseeing and adjudicating and, I guess, responding to this new phenomena. I mean, try to think of it. For millions and millions and millions of years, the notion of self-conscious directed action had been unknown in nature. It's that nature slowly gave way to an organism who could decide for itself. Now again, some of this gets very difficult because it really was collectivist at first. And I think, the drift from, okay, so now when we get at the drift from earliest forms of animism, then into polytheism, then into monotheism. What I think the argument would be, what you're watching as you see that drift is the slow and steady congealing and consolidating of an ego that becomes more and more consistent and more steady and more regular. So the degree to which agency comes to be experienced, it gets more and more grounded, more and more centralized. And if at first there are just bits and moments of flashes where people feel themselves to be really driven by conscious choice and deliberation of options and of choosing action, later that slowly becomes, again, more and more both consolidated as people become more and more consciously aware. And again, some of this, I guess, it's difficult that there are certain times and places where, I guess, consciousness dims down. I mean, I think there is great reason to believe that people were very highly consciously self-aware as you were watching the drift, I guess, out of ancient Greece, just as an example in the Western tradition, and the Roman period. You're starting to see the rise of polytheism as it was there, and the slow, steady dwindle into a kind of monotheism as it happened in the medieval period. See, I think part of this could be addressed as, it has to do with communication technologies, and some of it has to do with the way that literacy, I guess, consolidated a sense of an inwardness of individuals. That is, literacy at its very early stages is still largely collectivist. That is, in manuscript cultures, and when people are using parchment and scrolls and vellums and all these different kinds of writing technologies, it's not, again, until the mid-1400s that you get the printing press, and then from there this explosion of inward individualism. This is why, by the time you get to Descartes, and Descartes says, "I think, therefore I am," that's a literate expression of the earlier expression of the ancients. The ancient earliest peoples went, "The gods are, therefore we are." That is, they registered themselves as existing and as obviously there by saying, "Look, the gods are, and the gods can recognize us." That is, that's how they hailed themselves in a self-register. And Descartes was able to do this through the literacy that the printing press was funding, for the last couple hundred years. But if you follow that out, it's as if there are ebbs and flows of conscious awareness, that there do seem to be degrees to which people are kind of mindlessly carried along by habits and cultural practices and traditions, and the degree to which they can, in moments of conscious deliberation, call their own deeds into question and actions, and again, call them into question and interrogate them. So I guess, part of the issue then, and this maybe is, I guess, kind of a roundabout response to this question of how does this relate to Buber's notion of I and thou? You know, when Martin Buber gives his history of religiosity, he suggests that people first said thou, and the I was nascent. That is, the I wasn't really yet there while the earliest peoples were saying thou. Then, as they said thou, there explicitly became a sense of the I. And then, as the I congealed, the I-it pair emerged, where people could say I-it, and we increasingly treat the world as it's, you know, a set of objects and things to be used for secular and practical ends. And there is something, you know, he would say, there's something very right-minded about the need to treat things as means to ends. And without treating the world as an it, we would have been dead long, long ago. We would have never been able to survive. But there is something in learning how to speak of the thou. Now, when I speak the word thou, I'm not using the word to refer to an entity. The word thou, when I say thou, it's a speaking with one's being, and the I who says I thou is carried along with saying thou. And again, so they're pair words, and I'm going to put a link to the Buber video. They're pair words, right? I thou and I it are the two pairs. And when you say I thou, there's a certain kind of I that accompanies the thou. And when you say I it, there's a certain kind of I that accompanies the I it, or accompanies the it. And the I of the I thou and the I of the I it are a different kind of I. And when I say I thou, I don't have a referent. I'm not trying to connote or denote any particular being. It's not as if there is a being. It has to do with the attitude by which I give, I guess, a concerted recognition, and I guess, for lack of a better word, a reverence to this emergent phenomena. See, part of the problem is, what does it mean to say that humans can be aware of themselves as agents? Why are we not simply blindly driven by instincts? It would be one thing if we were fully, completely conscious all the time, and every action we ever made was fully conscious. It would be one thing if all of our actions were just unconscious and we just blindly moved through life the way that we digest food, or the way that we grow our hair, or the way that we dilate our eyes. It's just sort of biological process that goes on seemingly without much thought about it. But it's because we can experience ourselves as both, and because we experience ourselves as momentarily agents, and we have some sense of direct choice in the matter, and we can feel a kind of conscience because our doings, we feel like it matters. Like that when we're choosing, we feel that that choice says something significant about who we are. It's a who question. It's as if nature is disclosing to itself a certain capacity for responsibility, and that responsibility is the burden of making choice. And I guess this blooms into religion, I think, and this is what, you know, Charles Berger would say. I'm sorry, it's Peter Berger, Peter L. Berger, the sociologist. He would say, yes, that this is a kind of nomos building, that we engage in what's sometimes called an authoritative disambiguation, right? We give a kind of cosmic order, or we use the gods or gods to sanction certain agents because we struggle with what it means to be choosing agents. Now, someone could say, well, yeah, we don't need the gods. Okay, very good. I think we don't need any dogma. We don't need any appeal to those things that now we can see with historical retrospect of sort of what happened. But I don't think we've been able to get rid of this question of what does it mean that nature was able to evolve certain pockets of itself, that would be us humans, who do have the power to choose and to act and to somehow suffer the consequences of self-chosen action. I think those are the issues. Okay, thanks.